the time because their people have COVID. So there are books out there that are everyone loves, but nobody can get copies of. So it's been a challenge even to get the books into our store. But I think we've kind of got all the kinks worked out. But that's been something that every independent bookstore in the country has been grappling with as well.
For sure. And now we're facing what they're calling Shipageddon, which is shipping problems. So if you ever are frustrated because your book is not in or whatever, just know we are as well, and we're doing the best we can. I do want to point out that we probably maybe a couple hours ago, Elizabeth was begging for me to add more books to this list. To cut you off. So there's more. So if for any reason you feel like you want other options, feel free to message her. You can also make a shopping appointment with her, which all of us have kind of done informally, where she just takes us around the store, and it's amazing. So, okay, well, I'm going to start with the first one. The first one is What Kind of Woman by Kate Baer. And this is all going to be backwards, so apologies. I don't flock to poetry. This is I would say a modern poet. If you follow her on Instagram, she is so compelling. It's a pretty thin book, but I would say it's a book I'm going to keep. I think I even wrote in my review, it's going to be one that I refer to often. It is, I'm trying to remember. It's poetry for if you don't like poetry. And it's a lot of poetry about being a woman, about being a mother. There's a lot of rawness, but there's a lot of hope. I completely enjoyed it. I would say if you're shopping for your young like niece or like that's edgy and cool, she probably already follows her. Or if you're kind of like, I just need something that I can just take, this is like poems, they're pretty short. I can just take like little bits of and enjoy it and just contemplate. I'd really recommend her. So that is our first one.
All right, second, Happy Land by Wright Thompson. And the subtitle is A Story of Family, Fine Bourbon, and the Things That Last. And it's kind of hard to describe this book. It's a little bit of the history of the bourbon industry in America. It kind of describes how bourbon is made, and really the most famous family in the bourbon industry in Kentucky, which are the Van Winkle family. So Wright Thompson spent about a year shadowing Julian Van Winkle, who was kind of the quintessential bourbon man in Kentucky. And his grandfather, Pappy Van Winkle, started Pappy bourbon. And now the Pappy bourbon bottles will go for thousands of dollars on the internet. They're hard to find. And so it's really a story of 4 generations of a family doing what they love and the ups and downs. I absolutely love this book, and it would be a great gift. I think men and women would love it. I feel really smart talking about bourbon to people now when I didn't know anything about it before reading it. And this is one that Penguin really did not realize what a huge book this was going to be. They're having a hard time keeping it in print because it has been so popular. So I highly recommend Happy Land by Wright Thompson.
Awesome. I know. I will tell you that Elizabeth's been very pro bourbon since she's read that.
So like, is that wheat or corn? I'm trying to decide. I'm very impressed with myself. Okay, I'm up again. You Ought to Do a Story About Me. This is another great book for all the men in your life, but it's a fabulous story. If you know me personally, you know the thing I love second most to reading in this world is football. So this is a great story about a football player. And actually the story is a famous photographer was walking through New Orleans and took a picture of a homeless man. And the homeless man said, "You ought to do a story about me. I played in 3 Super Bowls." And so the photographer, Ted Jackson, befriended this man. And it's kind of a neat story of drug addiction, hope, despair, and really the urge to follow Christ and to do what is right. I really couldn't recommend this enough. I loved the story. You ought to do a story about me.
And I would say that's a pretty good gift.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, our next one. This one is Isabel Allende, A Long Petal of the Sea. She is, of course, beloved. If you've read her before, I'm sure you love her as much as Kimberly, who is our co-owner. This is the book that she really wanted to submit as her favorite book. And this is a story of a young couple fleeing fascist Spain in the 1930s. They immigrate to Chile to rebuild their life. The characters are very well developed. So if you have a high expectation for characters that you can understand and love, this is a good one. And there's a lot of themes of belonging and family in it. I would say this is like a good one for like the holiday when you're just wanting to kind of escape into something else where you have a lot of time on your hands too.
All right, next, Perestroika in Paris. I actually read this weekend, so it was the last one to make the list. And I loved the story. It reminded me of the movie Babe and also the book The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse, which is I would say a Lifetime Achievement Award at Fabled. We all love that story. So Perestroika is a racehorse in Paris. They call her, the nickname is actually Paris. And Paris escapes. She's a racehorse and kind of walks through the streets of Paris and befriends a dog and a bird and a couple of ducks. And there's a sweet story about a boy. It's filled with compassion and hope and just so sweet. I love Jane Smiley. I've read almost everything she's written. It's just a sweet, great story. So Perestroika in Paris.
Awesome. Next one is Nobody Will Tell You This But Me. Elizabeth and I both read this. It's a pretty fast read. This is written by Bess Cobb. She writes for Jimmy Kimmel. So I felt like because of her writing experience, it was very easy to read and very casual. It's a capsule of all her grandmother's messages to her. So there's like voicemail messages, emails, and like all the advice she gives her from like everything from like what kind of lipstick to wear to like how to choose a husband. But it's so much deeper than those things. I found that I missed my grandmother reading it. I mean, I cried at the end. Did you cry? So sweet. This is such a good gift for someone. I feel like you can grieve in it, but it is so heartwarming too. I just absolutely loved it. And you will just feel the bond that she has with her grandmother. So, okay, the next one is The Deepest South of All by Richard Grant. Okay, Elizabeth and I read this, and I think she read it first, and she was like, you have to read this so we can talk about it. I read it, and I don't think I got to talk to her at first, but I was like, we need to sit down and talk about this. And when you read this, you are going to want to talk about it with someone. I feel like it is, in the right environment, it is a very good book club book. Basically, the story is Richard Grant is a travel writer, and he's British, and he hears about Natchez, Mississippi, when it has like the largest per capita millionaires in US, maybe. And so he goes there and realizes it has this dark history, but rich history of slavery and how cotton has influenced the city. The characters in this book, I am waiting for a Hollywood producer to read this and say, this is who we need to make a movie about, because you can't even believe that they're real people, but they're real people. There's just so much to unpack about privilege and race, and the best thing part of it is storytelling. How a story is interpreted, how you tell a story, how a story influences people, and that is both for both races. I cannot recommend this book. I mean, I feel like this is probably one of my favorites. Even though we put it all around faves, as I talk about it more, I feel like I just enjoyed it so much. And Elizabeth, feel free to tell anything.
Yeah. I would say it reminded me of Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, but zanier. And it deals with just a multitude of issues. I don't know. I think I want my book club to do it for to pick it for a month, because I just love talking to people about it, which is the best thing about a book.
It's so true. Also, if you have listened to the S Town podcast, this book is very much like that. And that, if you listen to that podcast, you understand. It'll rock your world for sure.
Okay. Next one, The Guest List by Lucy Foley. This one is probably the raciest book on the list. I said it was a rated R mashup of Murder on the Orient Express and Then There Were None. So it's very Agatha Christie-esque, a dark and stormy night type of book. I think it would be a really good book to cozy up to this winter. And the main character is a very successful businesswoman who's getting married. She decides to get married to like a survivor type, a fictional survivor cast member. And they get married on this kind of deserted, haunted island. You can see it right here off the coast of Ireland. And so it's a wedding venue, and different people in the wedding party chime in. You realize pretty quickly somebody does not make it alive to the end of this book. But different people in the wedding party kind of give their point of view. You don't know which one dies. I thought it was thoroughly enjoyable and a great slow burn mystery. So The Guest List.
That's great. Next one. Okay, y'all just indulge me just for a minute. Open Book by Jessica Simpson. Now, if you would have told me I would have included this book on our favorites of 2020, I would not have believed you. But I read it and I could not believe how good it was. Now, I'm a part of the, I guess, newlywed generation that watched the Newlyweds on MTV, loved her, of course, was very invested in her marriage and then divorce. And I feel like this book is very true to her, but she has matured. And anything that you wanted to know behind the scenes, I think she reveals in it. It is such a good book to just, the fluff just to dive into. It is, I've heard people say that it's a good audiobook, but honestly, I felt like her voice was very true to herself. And in my head, she was speaking. So, we do read, I guess, more high literature here, but we also have, some of this stuff too. So Open Book by Jessica Simpson.
And fun fact, she was born in Waco. So some of the stories she tells actually take place in Waco. So kind of interesting. Okay, my next one, Long Bright River by Liz Moore. This is the only fiction, other than the poetry by Kate Baer. I think this is the only one you can get in paperback. It came out just last week or two. This was my first 5-star read of 2020. It reads like a police procedural, but actually it's an interesting story of two sisters in Philadelphia. And they grow up in just abject, awful poverty, humiliating things happen to them. But one of the sisters grows up and becomes a police officer who kind of patrols the mean streets of Philadelphia. And the other one becomes a homeless heroin addict. So the police officer sister is always kind of looking out on the streets trying to find her sister. Well, all of a sudden there is a serial killer on the loose killing women in this certain district of Philadelphia, and she can't find her sister. So there's a mystery, and interesting family dynamics. It's kind of thick. It's one of the bigger books on the list, but I just tore through it. I found it utterly fascinating and highly entertaining. So The Long Bright River. Oh, I'm up again. Okay, Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. Riley Sager is a fantastic thriller writer. Anything he writes, I read. Final Girls was one that he did a couple of years ago that I absolutely loved. So the thing that's so much fun about this one is it is a ghost story. And the main character in the book, when she was little, her parents bought a beautiful home, kind of a haunted looking home. And weeks after they bought the house, the family leaves in terror because of some ghost stories. and her father writes a best-selling book about their experience. So fast forward to the present, the father has just died, and the main character realizes that her father had never sold the house, and it was going to be up to her to get the house ready for renovation. So it's told in a neat way where you're in the present day, and then you're also reading bits and pieces of this best-selling book that her father wrote. So she's trying to get her house ready to resell, but will the ghost let her do it? You have to read to find out. I love this book.
Awesome. I wanted to say real quick, Andrea, I see that you have your hand raised. And well, if you have a question, will you write it in our Q&A and we'll answer it. So if anybody has any question about any book, we will stop, go back if we need to. That's just the easiest way for us to kind of keep going and then answer the questions as it's needed. Okay, next one is Crossings by Alex Landgren. I'm not going to say his name right.
Alex.
Yes, good old Alex here.
Yeah.
I think that Elizabeth handed me the ARC and was like, you should read this. It's kind of like Choose Your Own Adventure. And I think I like put it on my desk for a while and then picked it up just on a whim and dove into it. This is for your very smart uncle who knows everything and is smarter than anyone. I think this book, it took an incredible amount of concentration. It was so well done. Basically, the first prologue you have to read because it is written by the bookbinder who makes the book. And he says that someone named the Baroness has given him this book and said, you must bind it in this particular order. So, and not through like 1 through 365. You must bind it in this order. So he decides to bind it in the page number order, but he says, if you want to read it the Baroness way, then follow basically the hands on the pages. So I totally, because I'm me, was like, oh, I'm going to read it the crazy way. So you like start at page 150 and then you go back and and then eventually you read the whole book, but it's all in different, it reminded me so much of Choose Your Own Adventure. But basically the story is that two people are racing across time. A couple in love are kind of time traveling through people to find each other. It is a very sweet romantic story, but it's also harrowing. It's also, you just have to really concentrate for it. I would say the people I know that have read this, the Baroness way, have loved it. The people that I've known that read it in the order, it was kind of okay. It wasn't as great because it's really a book with 3 stories in it. And so if you read it that way, it's like, okay, that was just 3 stories. But if you read it the Baroness way, it's a full story. It is so fascinating. I would also say it's Choose Your Own Adventure meets Inception. If you've seen that movie, I would compare it to that. But thoroughly recommend it for that very hard to buy person. Okay.
The next one I have is Hamlet by Maggie O'Farrell. This book, I know for readers out there, there's a big genre that's popular with wives of famous people and what their lives were like. So there's Becoming Mrs. Lewis, or the story of Edgar Allan Poe's wife, Robert Louis Stevenson's wife. Well, this is about Shakespeare's wife. And he's actually never mentioned in the book. It's all about Agnes and her husband, the playwright from Stratford. And in real life, Shakespeare had a son named Hamnet or Hamlet. It was written in different ways. It's kind of murky. You don't exactly know what happened. So Maggie O'Farrell kind of imagined what happened. And I've read her reasoning behind what she thinks happened to Hamnet, and it makes a lot of sense. So years later, of course, the playwright writes a famous play called Hamlet. So this is written in a beautiful way. Maggie O'Farrell is a fabulous author. I've read lots of her books. It's smart and you kind of cheer for Agnes. I really enjoyed Hamlet. All right, next. There's a couple of authors on this list that I would read their grocery list and love it to death. and one of them is Erik Larson. And so anytime Erik Larson writes a book, I read it in a day or two and wait eagerly for more years for his next book to come out. I've literally read every single book he's written. And his 2020 book is The Splendid and the Vile. This is the story of Churchill, and really the beginning of his rise to power. And Larson says he decided to write this book when 9/11 happened. He was in New York City and he was so worried about his children, and he immediately thought, I wonder how Shakespeare, other book, Churchill felt during the Blitz with his children and how kind of living in danger for years. So my book club did this book recently, and my personal book club, it was one of our best book clubs of the year. It's a fabulous story. You'll learn a lot about Shakespeare. And why do I keep saying Shakespeare? Churchill, sorry. Anyway, it's a great book for any historian in your life or you. It's a great book. So The Splendid and the Vile.
I want to point out too, we had a question and I wanted to answer this one. If you have not gotten a list of his books, feel free to do the Q&A and I'll just drop the file directly to you, just because the chat may not show up, but just wanted to say that. Keep going, Elizabeth.
Okay. Next book is a Paragon. Sorry about the glare there. Rayleigh also loved this book. I'm sure she loved to talk about it too. Colin McCann, that's too bright. Colin McCann is a fabulous literary author. He's wrote How the Great World Spins, Let the Great World Spin, Transatlantic. I got to hear him speak in February. He's phenomenal. But a Paragon is kind of it's based on a true story and I'm going to mess up their names, but it's two people on opposite sides of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And both of them have lost their 10-year-old daughters to the conflict. So Bassam, a Palestinian, loses his 10-year-old daughter when an Israeli force accidentally shoots her at a border crossing. And then Rami loses his 14-year-old daughter, Smadar, to Palestinian suicide bombers. And these two men have just said, enough is enough. They form a coalition to find peace. But of course, so it's based in a true event. But Colin McCann just does a gorgeous job of describing it. So Rayleigh may have to say something else about it, but we both dearly loved A Paragon. Okay. So, I don't have the Thursday Murder Club with me. We've sold them out. So that's our next book, is the Thursday Murder Club. So feel free to click on the link and see the cover. I can't stop selling this book. So we are out of them on the store. We should be getting them in the next day or so, by Richard Osman. So this book combines two of my favorite genres. It is a kind of a British cozy mystery about elderly women behaving badly. So 4 pensioners in Britain live in a retirement community and they're kind of bored to tears. So every Thursday they pour through old cold cases and try to figure out murders. And the main character is Elizabeth, and she reminds me so much of The Murder, She Wrote, Angela Lansbury, but she's hysterical. She does things kind of off the book that are so cute. But anyway, people at their retirement village have started to get murdered. So they are on the case trying to figure it out. It's just absolutely precious and fun. And I loved, it was just a sweet, sweet story. All right. Ghosts of Harvard by Francesca Saratella. Fun fact about this book, my husband and I rarely go out of town, but last February, he had a meeting in Chicago and I brought this book along with me and almost never left the hotel room. I didn't want to leave because I was enjoying the book so much. I'd say, oh, just one more chapter, then we can go shopping. If I had known what was coming the next month, I may have been a little more adventurous. But anyway, Francesca Saratella is the daughter of Lisa Scottalina, who's got a great book coming out in 2021. This book reminded me of Dead Poet Society, Hamlet, A Beautiful Mind. The story is about a girl named Katie, whose brother went to Harvard, and he slowly developed schizophrenia and wound up killing himself. So Katie decides the next year she's ready to go to Harvard, and her parents are concerned about it. She said, I'm going to be fine. So it really talks a lot about the life of a college student at Harvard. I found it fascinating. But slowly Katie is starting to hear voices, and she's so concerned that she is now descending into madness. And anyway, I dearly loved this book, The Ghosts of Harvard. Are you up next? Yep.
Next one is The Jane Austen Society by Natalie Jenner. After I read this, I deemed it the perfect pandemic book because nothing too terrible happens. And sometimes you just need that reassurance. This is about a group of individuals who live in the same town where Jane Austen lived, and they kind of come together to create a historical marker for her. And it's kind of like they don't necessarily connect, or they're different from different parts of the village. And it's kind of their interaction. They're just kind of fun, little quirky people. When I was reading it, it really reminded me of the cast of characters in Notting Hill. They're just kind of loving, and oh god, Rayleigh's nodding, so she's agreeing with me. They're just kind of like loving, and you just want everybody to be okay. And it also has very like Guernsey vibes too, of like everyone kind of gathering around literature and celebrating it. If you love Jane Austen, of course, this is a must read. But yes, so there you go.
Okay. All right. Next one, Greenwood by Michael Christie. This is a huge 5-star read for me as well. It's told in an interesting way. It's 4 generations of the Greenwood family, and it starts in 2038, and then it goes back a generation to around 2008. Then it goes back a generation, then it goes back a generation, then it goes up, up, up. So you can kind of see what each generation of the Greenwoods, how each generation affected the other generation. The story really revolves around trees, and I think it's set in Canada. There was some sort of a virus that has killed off most of the old growth trees in the world, and there's only one spot left in the upper Northwest. And it's become sort of a museum to trees. So each member of the Greenwood family, there was a carpenter, there was a logger, there was an eco-terrorist, and anyway, it's told beautifully. I know a lot of people, even on Bookstagram that I know, absolutely love this book. I highly recommend Greenwood. All right. I'm sure if you have not read this book, you have seen it everywhere, The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. I have read both of Bennett's books. I think this one is the best one. She is maybe one of the most talented authors selling books today. The way she writes, the way she describes things, it's just beautiful. I can't recommend this book enough. So the story is about twin sisters who have grown up in a fictitious town in Louisiana. And this town is kind of known for all of the residents are very light-skinned African Americans. So these girls are tired of living in a small town. They escape to New Orleans. And at that point, one of the sisters passes for a white woman. She marries a white man, never tells the man that she is an African American, and the other one falls in love with an African American man. So kind of how their lives diverge is very interesting. Also, the twin sisters wind up having daughters who kind of meet later on, and their lives are just vastly different. So there's a lot of themes of people not being very comfortable in their own skin in this book. But I will read everything Britt Bennett writes. She's just a phenomenal author. So, and this one will be on every best of 2020 list that you'll see this year.
All right, we're going to transition to our top favorites of the year. So hopefully you got to write down some good ones from those all-around faves, is what we're calling them. Now we're going to talk about our top favorites.
Yes. This was hard to decide, but several of them really floated to the surface. The first one, Matt Haig, The Midnight Library. I picked up this book because I liked the cover. I honestly had not read anything that he has written in the past. I've since learned that Matt Haig struggles with mental illness, and so he writes about it in a way that's very accessible, that you can understand it a little better. So in this story, the main character, Nora, is having a really rough time, and just sort of in a moment of weakness, she decides she's no longer wants to carry on. So she tries to commit suicide, but winds up in this sort of middle area, but it's actually a library that's her, not heaven or hell, somewhere in the middle. And the person who is in charge of the Midnight Library is her librarian from when she was growing up, who meant a lot to her. And so the librarian tells Nora, every book in the Midnight Library is a different version of what your life would have been like if you had made different choices. So, at one point she was into playing music. So she got to read about what her life would have been like if she had continued that, or if she hadn't done, fed the cat that day, or something, like that. So it's very, very creatively done. It sounds depressing, but it's not. It's extremely hopeful. I just loved this book, and I don't know many people who've read it who haven't had the same reaction. I think it's kind of gaining some steam. So, like I said, it's not a depressing book. It's very hopeful and very creative, and I highly recommend The Midnight Library.
Okay, my next one is Una Out of Order by Margarita Montemor. I don't know that's how you pronounce her name, but I want it to be. Okay, I am a sucker for time travel.
We all are.
Traveling book, I don't know what it is. I love it so much. So I think when I heard this about time travel, I was like, that sounds really interesting. And this one was such a ride. The story is the main character, who I just forgot her name. She wakes up on her 18th birthday, and she is suddenly another age. And she ages in all out of order. So a lot of when I think New Year's Eve is when she kind of like is thrust into a new year, and she doesn't know how old she is then. She doesn't know her circumstances. She kind of has to grapple with what's happening. So every year is something new for her to understand. I flew through this book so fast. I would compare it to kind of a combo of Back to the Future and Midnight in Paris. So if you enjoyed those two, I would recommend it. Also, so many of us read this book and absolutely loved it so much. It's just so different than a lot of books out there, and really, really enjoyable. If you are not a reader, I would recommend this book.
Yes, that was a great one. Okay. Next one on the list is Christina Baker Klein's The Exiles. I read her book, The Orphan Train, and dearly loved it. I got to hear Klein speak at an event this summer, and I thought, oh, that book kind of sounds interesting. And I cannot tell you how much I love this book. It may be my favorite of the year. There's 3 of them that are my top favorites, and this is one of them. I told the author that I felt like she wrote this book for me. It has everything I love in a book. So it's the story of I guess back in the 1800s, Australia was a penal colony. They had a bunch of men who were sent there to be imprisoned. And the problem was they wanted to populate the country. Well, so they decided to start shipping convicted women to Australia. And so the main character is accused of a petty crime, and she meets other women who have also been convicted of petty crimes, and they're shipped to Australia. And so you learn a lot about something in history that really we don't hear a whole lot about. There's wonderful friendships. This book reminded me of Les Miserables, and it also reminded me of The Forgotten Garden, which is a huge favorite, I know, of Allison and mine. I could not recommend this book enough. I gave it to my mother, and she gave it to her sisters. This is a book that I think it's probably for the woman in your life, and any age woman would love this book. I could not recommend it more highly.
Great one. All right, my next one is Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. So if you are a fan of Frederick Bachman and his style of writing, you will, of course, love this book. And the fun fact about this book that we are announcing tonight is that this will be our January book club pick. So if you're interested in this book, I would snatch it up pretty fast. This book is about a hostage situation. And, but it's not, when you think about that, you might think of like CSI or something, but it is about a hostage situation of a group of very quirky people. And it starts with the hostage situation, and then it goes back in time of how it led up to that situation. When I was reading this book, it really reminded me, I hope y'all are enjoying by the way, all my movie comparisons, but it really reminded me of the scene in You've Got Mail when they're all stuck in the elevator and they all are trying to adapt to a situation they don't want to be in, but at the same time, they're having realizations about their life. That is really, I kept being reminded of that when I was reading this book. I think at the end I cried. It was so beautiful. And I mean, it's just what you expect from Frederick Bachman. It's like heartwarming and lovely and celebrates just ordinary people. So yes.
I think it reminded me of The Breakfast Club, but not Saturday Detention. And I would also recommend, I've had a few friends who've read it and they said it's kind of hard to get into. You're going to have to give yourself a hot minute to kind of figure out who all is whom. And this is a book in translation, so it might take a little time, but don't give up on it because it's a fabulous book.
Yes, I want to mention too, when Elizabeth was like, okay, you got to read this one, I started reading it. And I did have a little anxiety in the beginning where I was like, are you sure this is worth it? Because it's a hostage situation. I feel so sorry for these people. And she was like, press on through. So if you are feeling the same way, which I would say in conjunction with Jane Austen's Society, this is also a good pandemic book. If you just need to be reminded that the world is good, that people inherently are good, it's a really good option for that.
Yeah. All
right, and so the next one is, are y'all tired of us talking about this book?
Deal with it.
That's right. Is Shiner by Amy Jo Burns. This was our book club pick for 2 months ago. We had Amy Jo Burns on. She was so much fun and delightful. Such a fun personality to interview and talk about. I have told the story before, but I randomly picked this book up, saw it in a Penguin catalog. It really wasn't touted very much, but I flew through it too. It was haunting and lyrical. It reminded me of Winter's Bone, of Where the Crawdads Sing. It's about a girl who lives in Appalachia and has a father who is a preacher and is very charismatic, works with snakes. And you almost think in the book, you're like, is this set in present day? Because it feels like it should be 100 years ago, but it is in present day. And it's kind of it's a very coming of age novel of her understanding who her family is, who she is. It is so wonderful. I think we've all fangirled over Amy Jo words because of this book. I put this book in so many people's hands because they all need to read it. And I really would compare it to Where the Crawdads Sing. If you love that one, I really think you're going to love this one.
Yeah, we're pretty sure that Amy Jo would be our best friend if she lived in Waco. We love her. Okay, your turn. Yeah, your turn.
Yes. Okay. So now
those were our favorites.
That's our favorites. And we're going to transition to our honorable mentions, which otherwise known as we just can't help but tell people about these books. This one is Dear Edward by Anne Napolitano. I hope I pronounced it correctly.
Yeah.
The game of pronunciations today. This is also a coming-age novel about a boy named Edward who is the sole survivor of a plane crash that kills his whole family. And the book alternates between the flight and Edward's new life as he deals with the situation that he went through. Family members of the passengers reach out to him because he was the last person to see their loved ones alive. Elizabeth tells me that she could not put it down. I have been wanting to read this for so long, but you know, all the books, we just can't read them all. And so but this one is definitely one that I want to read and is an honorable mention for us.
Okay, I know so many of us are now trying to read more diversely, and this was one that I read, Winter Counts. This is a Native American author, and I'm going to butcher his last name, David Whedon. And this is interesting. It's a sort of police procedural. I learned something new, that the US government does not prosecute non-murders on reservations. So people and that's a true story. So people on the reservation, when they want to have justice served, they hire enforcers. So our main character is an enforcer on the reservation, and his nephew gets in trouble, and he is kind of called in to take care of it. There's sort of a drug culture going on. His nephew is accused of something he didn't do. So it's an interesting police procedural told from a Native American perspective. So I highly recommend Winter Counts. All right. So some of you may know I am from Alabama, and one of our favorite authors from Alabama is Rick Bragg. He writes the back page of Southern Living every month. He has written numerous memoirs about his life. All Over But the Shoutin' is one that I still put in people's hands, kind of a love story to his mama. I love that book. But the last couple of years, Rick Bragg has done these books. In fact, I'm looking at one right here, propping up my computer, of short stories about the South. And they're fairly thin. These are one of those that you can read a story a night, and they are hysterical. They are sweet. They are nostalgic, but they don't gloss over issues from the Southern issues. I got this for my dad last year. I'll probably get it for him again this year. My dad's also from Alabama. So, but this is not just Alabama. There's stories that take place from Louisiana all the way up to Virginia. So if there's somebody in your life who is a Southerner, I would recommend Rick Bragg's newest short story collection, Where I Come From. Okay. Allison?
It's 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson. If you like books within books, this is the book for you. This is about a bookseller who a few years ago wrote a blog about the 8 perfect murders in literature, and he lists them and where they were in literature. And I feel like as a literature nerd, I just enjoyed reading about them. But then the police approach him because murders are happening and they're copycats of these murders. So he, of course, is panicked. He doesn't know what's happening, but at the same time is still very fascinated that this is going on. After I read this, and I think Elizabeth, you said this too, I wanted to go and read all of the murders that are like the mysteries or stories that are of the murders mentioned in this book, just because it just piqued my interest. And it was just like such a this is like a book lover's book. I feel like it's just so well done. I would say if you have a mystery fan in your family, this is a great book for them. Or if you're someone who loves books, this would be a great choice for them too.
Okay, the next book is The Moonflower Murders by Anthony Horowitz. Other than Eric Larson on the list, Anthony Horowitz is another author I will read and buy every single one of his books. Anthony Horowitz wrote Foyle's War, if you have ever watched that BBC show, which we loved. But he writes, this is the second in the series. Magpie Murders is the first one. And he's also written The Word is Murder, The Sentence is Death. And all of his books are told in such a fun and unique way. And so this one is, I mean, it's a pretty big book, but his main character, there's two books going on in this book. So again, kind of like Eight Perfect Murders, a murder happens and we realize that it's also kind of copycatting another murder in literature. So you're having, you go back and forth between the literature, the book, and the other book. I know that sounds confusing, but if you love British mysteries, Agatha Christie, which I dearly love, I would highly recommend any of Anthony Horowitz's books. I probably would recommend reading Magpie Murders first, just to kind of get an idea of the characters. But yeah, if you've ever come in the store and told me you like mysteries, I've probably told you about Anthony. All right. White Ivy by Susie Yang. This one, I can't even tell you why I love this book so much. It's sort of a slow burn thriller, immigrant story, Chinese immigrant story, a character who's not even redeeming at all. And there's a love triangle. There's just a whole lot going on. And I literally couldn't put this book down. Jenna Bush Hager picked it for her book club book, I think last month. Again, it was just a really, really good, unputdownable book. So White Ivy. All right. This next one, a lot of people have books on their book challenges to read a book in translation. And if you like reading books in translation, I would recommend Freshwater for Flowers. This book it's a French book, and it was so popular in France that they translated it into English. My book mentor highly recommended it to me, and I started reading it, and I felt like I had a warm blanket on me. It was told in such a beautiful way. So our main character, Violet, tends a cemetery in France, and she lovingly tends to all the graves, and you kind of get to know who is buried in this cemetery. And one day a man comes in with an unusual request that kind of rocks her world. So there's a little sadness in the story. It's not one, if you're needing a thriller, it's kind of a quiet, contemplative book. It's also kind of long. But I was very surprised at how much I loved Freshwater for Flowers. Are you up next?
We're still going.
Oh, I got one more. Sorry. Okay. This was one of the first books that I read this year. I said, the first time you ever listened to Bon Jovi and you had mall bangs, you need to read this book. It's kind of the definitive story of the Gen X woman. And I heard her speak at a conference and could hardly wait to get my hands on this book. I feel like it maybe paints a little bleaker picture of life for a Gen X woman than I have experienced, but so much of it I related to. I think this would be an excellent book club book, especially if the women in your book club are in their 40s and 50s. She actually wrote a article, I think in the New Yorker, about why Gen X women can't sleep. And there was everyone was talking about this article. So the publisher says, you got to write a book about this. So I found it fascinating, and I can't recommend it enough, Why We Can't Sleep.
And Elizabeth, I want to point out that you mentioned this book on Facebook, and I feel like you got a ton of comments.
Yeah, like 60 comments about this one book. So it really does strike a chord.
For sure. All right, my next one is Me and White Supremacy by Layla Sayed, I think. This came out in January of this year, and is a very timely book. I think as we all experience things this year involving racial reconciliation and racial injustice, I think we had a lot of customers come to us and kind of wonder, like, where do I start? What do I need to read? And this book came out, which is really great about this book. It is kind of set up almost as a workbook. So it is 28 days of kind of examining yourself. If you're Caucasian, examining yourself and white privilege. And I think it is a more gentler way of looking through things, but also a very true way of looking at things. I would say the reviews on this are really all over the place, as far as, like, some people loved it and some people it did not relate to them. But it has been one of our best sellers, I would say, in kind of the racial injustice category of books, and one that we're constantly putting in people's hands. So if you haven't read this one, or is one that you want to give to someone that you kind of been in conversation with, I recommend this one.
Okay, I've got 2 more to go. And then we get to have Rayleigh talk. All right, so my next book is How the Penguins Saved Veronica. Again, this is one that I've been putting in people's hands, and I don't have one in my hand right now. Fun fact about this book, I was actually reading it on the slopes of Colorado when everything shut down for COVID. So when I think about this book, I think of the day the world shut down. So I guess if you've heard me talk tonight, you realize I do love books about the elderly behaving badly, and Veronica is one of these women. She's an 85-year-old curmudgeonly woman who has a fortune, and she's 85 years old, so she knows her life is winding down, and she wants to figure out where she wants to give her fortune. So she was watching a show about the Antarctic penguins and decided, I think I'll give them all my money. But I have got to visit the site in Antarctica to make sure that it's legit. So everyone in Antarctica said, yeah, right, no, not happening. But she somehow finagled a way to get to the Antarctic, and it is so sweet. And Veronica becomes a kinder, gentler human. And it's just one of those books, if you need a sweet escape, I loved How the Penguins Saved Veronica. All right, my last book on the list, Saving Ruby King. So if the last book was an escape and an easy read, this one is much, much darker, but so fascinating. So in the beginning of this book, you find out that Ruby's mother has been murdered. And so the whole book is trying to figure out who murdered Ruby's mother. And the story is told through different perspectives, through Ruby, through her best friend, through her mother's best friends, and also they're all members of a South Side of Chicago church. And the church is even a character who kind of tells the church's story and what the church has seen over the years. So it is dark. There's domestic violence in this book. But it is so creative and so well told. And I dearly loved this book, Saving Ruby King.
Right. This is my last book on the list. This came out in the beginning of November. 2020, the longest year. This is HRH by Elizabeth Holmes. She is a wonderful follow on Instagram. I have loved the Royals for years before The Crown. I like to point that out. People are loving it. You're late to the party. This is actually my copy because every time we have this book in the shop, it sells out. This is, first of all, it's like a coffee table book. It's this beautiful, like, like light robin's egg blue. What's really great about her is that she worked as a journalist, and then I think was a mother, and then started to really notice how the royals fashion sends messages to the public. And so she started this Instagram account. She started talking about it. So anytime that, if you follow her, anytime that Kate Middleton will have like right now they're on the royal train tour, has an outfit, she will dissect it about why she's wearing this particular plaid, because it's a reflection of the tartan plaid of the Scotland city she's in, or something like that. And it's so well done. And she's really funny too. This one includes, of course, also Princess Diana. And it just, I mean, it's one of those like you want to pour over. This would be an amazing gift for someone, which I say that because this is what my husband gave me. He managed to purchase it at Fabled without me knowing, which was quite a feat because I look at all the sales every night. So I absolutely love this one. And so I recommend it if you love the royals, or if you just need a beautiful coffee table book. It's awesome. Okay, we're going to transition to Rayleigh. She's going to tell us about our sci-fi fantasy. So if you have someone in your family who loves sci-fi fantasy, and I would say Rayleigh has a very high expectation for those books. She is not one, like if we love a book and Rayleigh doesn't, she is just telling us that she did not like that book. She's bold in that, and I appreciate that too. She is I will tell you this too about her. As back of house manager, she receives all of our books. So she receives them in boxes according to publisher. She organizes them, and then she gets them out on the floor with our booksellers, put them and organize them. So it's a very organizational feat that she is involved. So she sees, touches in a very sanitary manner every book that comes into Fabled. There's a lot of instances I go back there and she's pulled a book and she's like, what is this? I like this. I want to read this. And she's also always listening to books too. She's probably, I would say, our strongest reader as a bookseller. And also, like, personally, I have a very specific plan for her, which means her involved being a career bookseller. So she knows all this though. But I'm going to let her talk about her favorites. And again, we were asking her earlier for her favorites. And then I was like, you know what, why don't we just let Rayleigh talk about it? Because she's going to be enthusiastic. She's going to make people interested. So we're going to do this very smooth transition where she's going to come sit in my seat and bring her book. So here we go.
Hi, I'm Rayleigh. I was going to introduce myself, but Allison did it for me, which is fantastic. Just real quick, Elizabeth said that I might have something to add about a Paragon, and I absolutely do. I fell in love with this book. Just a quick fun fact about it. Sorry, if you see me looking down, it's because I'm looking at notes. Some of the chapters are biographical, and some of them are fiction, but Colin McCann set the chapters up in such a way that you're not going to know which is which. It's like, it was so creatively done, so beautifully written. Please, if you read nothing else from this list, please read a Paragon. It's fantastic. It's the story that the media won't tell you, which is always a plus. Okay. First sci-fi fantasy pick. This is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. You may have heard of her from Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. This book was insane, like literally insane. It follows two men, Piranesi and his companion, not necessarily a friend, but a companion, the other. Basically, Piranesi is dwelling in this strange magical house, and he doesn't know how he got there, why he's there, or who he can trust, but there's something both beautiful and sinister about it. Gave me major The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle vibes, which is by Stuart Turton. More on him later. Susanna Clarke is a literary genius. I loved this book. You can sometimes find me just holding this book because I loved it that much. It should be cherished as a beloved friend and protected at all costs. It's amazing. Please read it. So back to Stuart Turton. He wrote The Devil and the Dark Water. It sounds like it's creepy and like and it's about the devil. Yes, it's creepy. It's not actually about Satan himself. Don't you worry. It's fine. I describe this book as a Dutch Sherlock Holmes mystery set on a boat, except Sherlock Holmes is in prison and John Watson has to solve the mystery. It's fantastic. It follows these people traveling from an island in the Dutch East Indies back to Amsterdam, and there's this ghost that's haunting the ship, and no one knows what's happening except for the John Watson character, who ends up solving the mystery. Y'all, Stuart Turton has mastered the art of the plot twist. There were at least 70 plot twists in this book, but they were so creatively done, and the ending was so satisfying. I was so surprised at how satisfying the ending was. Also, bonus, it's set in the 1600s in the Netherlands on a boat, which is my absolute favorite setting to read about. It's oddly specific, but it's true. Next up, Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. You may know Naomi Novik for her Beauty and the Beast retelling, and for she has a few other fairy tale retellings, and they're all great. But this one it's a fresh take on the magical school, except this magical school, it doesn't have any teachers, and it's trying to kill the students the whole time. So the students have to figure out how to learn for themselves and how to survive. And it's almost like Harry Potter meets Gossip Girl, except it's geared for adults. It's fantastic. Please read it. It's also the first in a trilogy. And I'm already highly anticipating the second two books, and I don't even know where they're coming out, which is great. Whew, take a deep breath here. Hinch by Natalie Zeno Walshotz. This is, I tried to think of things to compare it to, but the Avengers, meh, and other little superhero story comparisons are they don't do it justice. This one, the main character, she is an 8 on the Enneagram, which is me. I'm an 8 on the Enneagram. And so the whole plot revolves around her attacking the system of superheroes and revealing the villainous tendencies of heroes. And she does this all while she's making Excel spreadsheets, which that's me. It's me. It's great. I listened to this as an audiobook through Libro FM, and it is the perfect combination of fun and drama and action and fantasy and real life issues. And Walshotz for sure did a great job of leading her readers to pondering the line between what is really a hero and what is really a villain. It was great. Gin Patrol on the Purple Line by Deepa Anapara. This is my #1 favorite of this year. It wrecked me in the best of ways. It follows 3 children who innocently attempt to solve the mystery of the kidnapping of multiple of their classmates. It's so hard and it's so good, and I wept throughout the story. It's the story of a community, of the resilience and innocence of children. And in this book are deep issues and tragedies told from the perspective of 3 9-year-olds who are trying to solve these horrific kidnappings. And it's set in an Indian slum, and the main character is a 9-year-old boy who watches way too many police procedurals, which is why he thinks that he can solve this mystery. It's beautiful. I was devastated by the tragedy, yet deeply marked by the hope of the characters in the book, because in all, it's just a hopeful book, even despite the tragedy, which that's us in a pandemic, is it not? Okay, last, certainly not least, Alison earlier said that all of us at Fabled have gone on a tour of the shelves with Elizabeth, and this was one of her picks for me. It is The Enemy of All Mankind by Stephen Johnson. It is the story of Henry Every, who is the pirate who inspired the golden age of pirates, which is so fun. I love pirates. Also set in the 1600s, not in the Netherlands, but still close enough. Fun fact, Henry Every is the guy who sparked the very first international manhunt, but I will leave it up to you to find out whether or not he got caught. Yeah, that's what I got.
So I'm curious, all you participants, what books are you excited about? What sounded good to you? Please feel free to put it in chat, or if you have a question for us, put it in the question and answer box.
Yes. Okay, so you guys understand why we had Rayleigh come on. Right? I mean, we're not going to pretend. She knows exactly what she loves to read, and she makes us excited to read what she reads. So I'm so glad that she got to be here. Yes, definitely put in the chat what you're excited about reading. We would love to, or if you have any questions about anything that you saw. I think that Jessica mentioned that Winter Count sounds a lot like Longmire.
I should have said that. I love Longmire, and it's totally reminded me of all the characters of Longmire in my head were, I mean, in Winter Counts were the characters from Longmire.
That's awesome. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping and just reiterate what I have told everyone before. First of all, again, I'm going to, Amanda said she is excited about Paragon, Piranesi, and the Midnight Library. Sue says she can't read. She says she sat here and kept adding to my Goodreads list. I love that. Yes, that's basically what we do all day, I think, especially when Elizabeth's in the office, is just keep a running list. I always say that working here is like working at a buffet, but you can't eat anything. You just want it all.
You have to eat really slowly.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to drop again the links in the chat and tell you again what they are. So the first one here, hold on just a second. I'm going to drop in one from Dropbox. That is the document that we have been referring to, the list of books that will tell you the all-around favorites, our top favorites, honorable mentions, and then we just have it listed as Rayleigh's top, so you know exactly which ones to find there. Sue says she's reading Exiles now. Oh, I can't wait to hear it.
Lucky.
And then Annie says she wants too many, thinking Pappyland for gifts and maybe The Deepest South. I think those would definitely be excellent ones. Okay, the next one, the link I'm dropping in here is the link to the list on our website. So if there's some that you're like, I definitely want to buy now, that's the link that goes directly to you, and it just makes it easy. You don't have to do any searches. They're all there. And then next is the coupon code. So it's Fabled Favs. And listen, like, this is not really a coupon code. It's really just a prompt for our booksellers when you make an online order. So if you're like, is it Fabled's Faves? Is it Fabled's Favorites? Just put what you think is it. And our booksellers will know to give you 20% off of if you buy 5 or more of these books. They will 20% off, which is huge. And again, like, we don't really have coupon codes on our site. We do keep bothering our point of sale people that we want them. But what we basically do is when we receive your order, we just give you 20% off. So you'll receive it on your bank transaction. All right. And I think Christy said she wants to read Shiner. You know, we're crazy. Well, yeah. Sorry. Yes. The one that is like Where to Crawdad Sing is Shiner.
And if you're local, you just can type out the ones you want and we'll get it ready for you, and we'll do curbside, right?
Also, I want to mention, if you're kind of like, well, first of all, I'm truly expecting everyone to be completely overwhelmed and glazed over at this point. So if you feel like you're like, I just listened to all of that and I have no idea what I want to read, Elizabeth and our children's book buyer, Avery, are accepting shopping appointments. These are completely free. They will walk around the shop with you. And I can tell you from personal experience, like when I tell Elizabeth, like, I want time travel, but not Outlander, she knows exactly where to guide me. And she will know, like, especially if you're shopping for gifts, if you're like, this year I want to buy everybody a book, she will take on your shopping list, show you exactly what to buy. Avery is amazing because she's a reading specialist. So if you have a child that is maybe ready to read or is a reluctant reader, she tells us like reading terms that we don't even understand what they mean, but they sound very official. And it really gives us the trust that she knows what she's talking about.
She's amazing. And also, we didn't go into a whole lot of trigger warning stuff tonight. I think that kind of starts sounding like medicine advertisements about all the bad things. So if you have a specific question, you can email me and you can find it on the website, or my Instagram is at Waco Reads and you can direct message me. I've read pretty much everything we talked about tonight, but Rayleigh's. We love Rayleigh. So if you have a question about that, feel free to reach out. I love, obviously, talking about books.
Okay, and the last thing, oh good, I had a couple people say I want to read Crossing, so I'm so excited to talk about it. I will, so Elizabeth's been known to like try to give her cell phone out for anybody who needs help, but just feel free to, just email her so she doesn't get a million.
Cell phone that way. We can talk books.
That's right. I wanted to mention that Rayleigh has an Instagram as well, Ray
Yes.
2020. So if you really like her style and what she reads, if you're a fantasy person, she's a great follow. I love following her too, because again, she will give you the really blunt, like, I'm going to tell you if I like it or don't like it, which I love. Like, I think our publishers kind of don't know what to do when she's like, this is terrible. So, okay, then last thing I want to say before we say goodbye, which we really, I understand we flew through these so fast. I think there were 42 books. I think we met. I mean,
44. I think we added at least one or two.
Yes,
yeah.
we did a couple today. So, and then we wanted to meet an hour, and we're only a little bit over. So the last thing I want to remind you is that we will be doing Anxious People for our January book club. So if you're like, that was too many books, I just want to read one, what do I read? Read this one. We have a couple at the shop right now. I'm going to put in the chat the link to register for that Zoom. Frederick Bachman is, we will not be having him on. He may be willing, but I don't know that we speak his language. But so we'll be on in January, and the dates are there too. And Brenda has read it. I think she's excited about it. We will be on there discussing it, and can't wait to hear what you guys think about it. It's just such a great book. Thank you so much for spending time with us too. I know that it was a lot of books to go through, and I appreciate your patience. And then again, just a reminder, I will include all the links and the recording tomorrow in an email you'll get tomorrow morning, as well as a link to the Zoom, which you can register now. So thank you guys so much.
To everybody, thank you for supporting us.
Appreciate you so much. All right, see you guys later.